I'm not perfect, God, neither are you. Tell these salty motherfuckers to tell the truth. Tell politicians to give up the rooms. Tell silent voters to stand up to the booth.
God, it's me. Can you hear my plea? Feeling like I'm lost in this world, can't you see? Demons creeping in, trying to take control of me. But I'm just trying to find the light, trying to break free. I'm not perfect, God, neither are you. But why you keep forgetting me? What did I do? Trying to have a convo, but you starting to preach. Feeling like I'm on a leash. Can't find no peace, find no peace. Living in hell, can't you hear my plea? I'm suffocating, can't you see? Why you let these false prophets roam free? While the real ones suffer, can't you see? I'm not perfect, God, neither are you. Why you keep targeting me? What did I do? Trying to have a convo, but you starting to preach. Feel like I'm on a leash, can't find no peace.
Hardest battles, strongest soldiers, greatest burden, broadest shoulders, pushing up just like these boulders. This conflict like it's water, so this mercy, take my chalice, seeking grace through all this malice. All of these salty motherfuckers to give out.
Politics and sinners, they all the same. Got me stuck in this endless game. But I won't give up, won't play the role. Gotta do what's best for my soul. I'm not perfect, God, neither are you. Tell these salty motherfuckers to tell the truth. Tell these politicians to give up the room. Tell silent voters to stand up to the booth. Living wild but truthfully free. God keep on watching over me. Take my pleas and keep the receipts. I just want to.
Good morning. So I want to bring up a couple of topics today that I feel that is important to know in Minnesota, right? So I want to talk about scandals, shell games, and shady politics. Minnesota's dirty laundry. I really want to get into that. So, but before we get into all that, I want to get into Don Tripp, Top Floor Freestyle, independent music. Go support your independent music. With that being said, I'll be right back right after this.
This message was self-destruct. Top floor of the condo, staring at the city. My life is like art. I'm living out my lyrics. My vision's explicit. My taste is exquisite. All I spit is dope, cause I used to deal it. The streets is what raised me. It took a whole village. You never see me smile. I need you to take me serious, cause I ain't never joking. Point blank period. Say I ain't never joking. If I said it, then I meant it. Shout it, I'm vintage. It ain't a nigga like me. I like my guns quiet and I like my women feisty. I know you don't like me, so what, bitch, bite me. I'm kicking down the door cause y'all niggas ain't invite me. Honey, I'm home. I took a seat on the throne where I belong. The journey was awful long. I'm going at it alone. I got it. Whoever wanted, I turned him into a donor. I put my work in the street. My cubicle was a corner. My brother was in the coma. I couldn't do shit to save him. I had to sit back and watch as the Reaper came back to take him. I wish he made it to witness how far I made it. Cake every day, we don't need a special occasion. I'm still gassing up, my ego then got inflated. Cause she ain't never read my name on no affidavit. Still, I move like I'm under investigation. All the carrots I done gave to my lady, no vegetation. Sorry, you asked me too many questions, I get evasive. Dr. Don tripping, you niggas testing my patience. Keep trying, you not phasing them. Hard-body vibranium. Shooting like I aimed at a hoop in a gymnasium. Real, still recognize real, and you an alien. The skeletons inside my closet could fill a stadium. I'm still shining on niggas, I feel radiant. You not who you are in your rhymes, you a plagiarist. Ballin' in this bitch, I'm the favorite for a daily pick. I just had a dream that I was broke and that shit made me sick. Here's what the tub told the toilet on some player shit. You might get more ass than me, but I don't take no shit. Steady mobbing with the carbon, got a laser kit. Money on your head, I put out more hits than Taylor Swift. Pistols flashing, lights, camera, action. Got my ears ringing, I might need an aspirin. My wife a spoiled brat, she wanna take a trip to Aspen, just so she can take a bunch of selfies in the cabin. I remember vividly when we ain't really have it. Food stamps below, we had to stretch it out and ration. A couple M's up and still not comfortable relaxing. Maybe that's a concept that I ain't truly grasped yet. I was moving pounds before they called them hashtags. Feeling like Lito with the trash bags, long lip piff.
That was Don Tripp, Top Floor Freestyle. That's a dope song. You know, he always comes out hard. I want to get into, before I start off, you know, I want to get into what I feel like is something serious. You know what I'm saying? We always talk about crack. We always talk about crime. And then we talk about racism. But what we don't talk about is the 1980s. And I want to go back there for a little bit, right? So I want to play you stories from the 1980s that really we're still fighting today. You know, we're still fighting racism. We're still fighting crime. And we're not just fighting crack. We're fighting fentanyl. We're fighting heroin. There's so many other drugs like Trank. You know, what is the solution? So that's what I want to get into at first today. So let's get into crack, crime, and racism in the 1980s.
New York itself was the scene of a lot of racial violence during the decade. The city saw 3 high-profile mob cases no different than lynchings. In 1982, MTA maintenance man Willie Turks was dragged from his car and beaten to death near Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, and his 2 co-workers barely escaped with their lives. The perpetrators were over a dozen white men in their teens and early 20s. The ringleader, an 18-year-old weightlifter named Gino Bova, was convicted of second-degree murder by a jury of 11 white people and 1 Latino. The judge at his sentencing remarked, "It was a lynch mob on Avenue X that night. The only thing missing was a rope and a tree," before giving Bova the maximum 5 to 15-year sentence, of which he served 8. In Queens, New York in 1986, 23-year-old Trinidadian construction worker Michael Griffith and his friends traveled from Brooklyn to Howard Beach to pick up paychecks. Their car broke down. Walking roughly 3 miles to find a payphone and some food, they were met by a pack of over a dozen teenage and young adult racists. Michael was chased by a mob of white teens who beat him and his friends with baseball bats and tire irons. Fleeing from the mob onto the nearby highway, Michael was fatally hit by a car. The 17-year-old British teen who led the mob, John Lester, was convicted of second-degree murder and given 10 to 30 years, ultimately serving 13. 2 others were convicted and served 10 to 14 years apiece. The driver, who was alleged to be connected to the mob but the son of a cop, was cleared of any wrongdoing. Just 3 years later, another mob of white teens would murder a black person, this time much more directly. Yusuf Hawkins was 16 years old when he and his brother and 2 friends went to the largely Italian-American Brooklyn neighborhood of Bensonhurst. Bensonhurst was filled with recent immigrants, many from Sicily and southern Italy. Yusuf and friends were there to check out a $900 1982 Pontiac they saw listed in the classifieds. Little did Hawkins and his friends know that a mob of white teens were laying in wait to attack black men that were rumored to be attending a white girl's birthday party that night. Yusuf was beaten to death, and one of his friends who had also been beaten was detained by police for several hours without medical attention. Wrote Garrett McGrath, 3 days after Yusuf Hawkins, 300 black demonstrators marched through the streets of Bensonhurst. Neighborhood residents cursed and spat upon the protesters, hitting them with food. Some locals held watermelons.
In the aftermath of the killing, racial tensions in Bensonhurst and New York City have mounted. Local marches organized by civil rights groups have drawn anger from the community.
Why should the whole community be indicted and maligned and called racist for the acts of one individual? These people are good people. This is a good community, and there are not racists in this community.
This is not racist community. We just don't like black people. That's all.
My son will never turn this corner again.
No, he won't.
Only because of this, the pigment of his skin. Do you understand that? This is what America must learn. That we are no longer.
So I want to ask a question. If you're not racist, but you don't like black people, what is that? If you don't like black people, what is that? Is that not racist? Is that not hatred in your heart? Isn't that that's basically telling me you don't give a fuck. You basically don't care. It's not, you're not these. Yeah, I just don't get it. If you don't like black people, how are you not racist? So, yeah.
Gonna take this.
Multiple murderers of Yusuf were arrested and jailed lightly, with only 2 receiving hard time, leading to protests in the early 90s. Murders like these were just a reminder to those wrapped up in a Cosby Show fantasy of what the black experience meant in America. These 3 high-profile cases were in New York, a step away from Cosby's Brooklyn, and not in the Confederate-loving South, which was seeing a reverse migration trend of 355,000 new black residents from 1985 through 1989 in Atlanta, Virginia Beach, and Charlotte. When the subway vigilante Bernard Goetz shot 4 young black men on a New York subway train in 1984, there were 3 main groups of people debating the issue. There were those who believed the 4 men's version, that the 18 and 19-year-olds were panhandling and that a racist white man had shot them. There were others who believed Goetz's version, that the men, 3 of whom had prior criminal convictions, were part of a growing crime culture of theft and assault and tried to rob Goetz. That camp was split between those who thought Goetz overreacted when he used his unlicensed gun,
and him taking a vigilante type response to crime in the city leads other people to feel that they can do it too. It can be harmful to all of us.
and those who thought Goetz was justified in the shooting.
I think he was, protecting himself. This is around the Christmas holiday. You got to look out for yourself.
I think he did right. I really do. Because somebody's got to do something, and the police aren't always there.
What do you think about the fact that he's come back to New York? Do you feel he's coming back as a criminal?
I think he's a good man. I think he's a good man. He wants to show the public, look, I did it, and I'll pay the price, but I had to defend my life at that instance, in that moment.
He's totally, violated some rules and regulations, but at the same time, I have a feeling, he did something right.
Goetz was just one of several people who took matters into their own hands, but his was the most high profile.
Angry and hopeless, some citizens have taken the law into their own hands. A vigilante backlash against crime. In Miami, crack houses have become the targets of arsonists. Recently, 4 suspected crack parlors were destroyed within a 10-hour period. Earlier this month in New York City, several people were arrested for beating a purse snatcher to death. They say their neighborhood has been plagued by a series of drug-related crimes. In Detroit, 2 men were charged with arson after they burned down this house. Butch Parisi and his neighbor, Perry Kent, say they took drastic measures to get rid of a nest of crack dealers.
A New York volunteer patrol group, largely made up of black and Latino teens called the Guardian Angels, collected money towards Goetz's legal defense fund. The Guardian Angels had been founded in 1979 for the purpose of self-policing the city's subway systems in the face of rising assaults and robberies. An ongoing problem since the 70s was chain snatching, with one 1986 article describing a 37-year-old Bronx man who was dragged to death by a car when he tried to get his chain back from thieves. This was just one of several fatalities, and the fear of having your chain snatched would become a regional joke.
A jury of your peers has found you guilty of chain snatching. I sentence you to death by electric chair.
Boy, I should beat the links over you. You better take him to the chair.
Objections to these kinds of crimes created support for Bernard Goetz, who was eventually cleared of major charges and only served 8 months for illegal weapons possession. Roy Ennis, the director of the Congress of Racial Equality, had lost 2 of his sons to gun violence, and the group threw its support behind Goetz and the right of private citizens to carry a concealed weapon. The Reverend Al Sharpton and others called Goetz a racist. It was revealed in 1985 by one of the 4 men, Daryl Caby, that the group had intended to rob Goetz. Another, James Ramsey, would end up in prison for raping a pregnant woman in 1986. Another, Barry Allen, ended up robbing a 58-year-old a few years later. The intra-community disagreement over whether Goetz was racist and how the 4 would-be robbers should have been treated would continue in other arguments about how to handle crime in the black community.
Boston Celtics select Len Bias of the University of Maryland. There he is, Len Bias.
In 1986, Maryland native Len Bias seemed to be on top of the world. The 22-year-old University of Maryland basketball player was being compared to Michael Jordan, and it collected his second ACC Player of the Year award. On June 17th, he was selected by the Boston Celtics as the second overall pick in the NBA draft. He was already in negotiations to accept a $1.6 million endorsement deal with Reebok.
What do you think your potential is?
Well, I think I need to improve more on my ball handling and my all-around play, but I think vastly I need to improve on my ball handling and just keep working on my game.
Well, you said you wanted to play basketball, model clothes, and do some interior design, and you're going to have plenty of time to do that and probably plenty of money. And to find out more about that, let's go up to Red Auerbach now in Boston.
By Juneteenth, he would be dead of a cocaine overdose.
It's no joke. Like in Washington Hall, apartment number 1103. You're giving him mouth to mouth. You can hear it now. You have to get him back to life. There's no way he can die. Sir. Please come quick.
Bias died of cocaine intoxication, which interrupted the normal electrical activity of his brain, which controlled his heartbeat. This resulted in the sudden onset of seizures and cardiac arrest.
His drug overdose, though high profile, was just one of many affecting the black community in the 80s. Bias's parents were dealt another blow when in 1990, the second of their 4 children, Jay, was killed in a drive-by shooting. The grief of these parents would motivate them to participate in anti-drug and gun control policy discussions, symbolizing 2 major concerns for the black community at large in the late 80s. Crack use was a raging problem nationwide, wrapped up in wealth inequality, unemployment, and refusal to treat drug addiction as a disease rather than a criminal act. Plus, other social issues made the lure of easy drug dealing money or cheap self-medicating alluring. Excellent books like Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow delve into the systemic way the crack epidemic was weaponized by politicians to jail the population, often at a profit. But there's more to the story.
Some local politicians are asking for federal military help.
The National Guard could bring in persons or military police in jeeps and patrol those areas where we know they're heavily fortified and insist that they turn in those guns.
The city has declared a crime emergency. It is planning to shift 450 officers from the wealthier districts where crime is low to the tougher sections where murders are high. As part of the shift, the police chief is expected to move some officers from desk jobs to street patrols 1 day a week.
It wasn't just white people pushing for the criminalization of drug pushers and users, and this was something that had been evolving for a few decades. In 1979, Ebony magazine had dedicated an issue to detailing black people's growing alarm at the harm being perpetuated by their own in their own communities, discussing the term black-on-black crime, which they predicted would be a big problem in the following decade if nothing was done. They listed the causes as hard drugs, an inadequate prison system, racism, TV and movies, and a lack of morality. A number of cures were presented, including a return to religious morality and correcting economic justice, the latter put forth by Congressman John Conyers. Winston E. Moore, however, the chief of security for Chicago's housing projects and the first black warden of a Cook County jail, wrote a popular piece saying, "It is my conviction that we will never put an end to the mounting problem of black-on-black crime until we stop coddling the hoodlums." Not only are these criminals allowed to prey on their law-abiding brothers and sisters with virtual impunity, they have attained bona fide hero status among many young blacks. He called for severe crackdowns on drug pushers while pointing out that the fastest growing crime in the black community was rape, of which nothing was being done because of stereotypes about black women. And only 1 year later, in another editorial, he would blame black mothers for homosexuality, rape, and femicide. Atlanta's chief of police, George Napper, who was demanding community accountability, wrote, "On too many occasions, friends have told me that they have gone out of their way to say corrective words to a 9 or 10-year-old youngster, only to be cussed out. Further, when reporting the incident to the child's mother or father, more obscenities were forthcoming. Obviously, and unfortunately, the next time the youngster is involved in a similar situation, there will be tendency to call the police and have them deal with it. Too many of our kids that can be controlled in the neighborhood end up being treated or mistreated by the criminal justice system." This quote demonstrates that while many black Americans acknowledge acknowledge the damage and violence of the American legal system, the growing disconnect from community and shared racial values in the face of rising crime made calling cops on each other a bit easier, especially if you had witnessed or been a victim of a crime. Numerous Ebony subscribers wrote into the magazine agreeing with Winston Moore's demands to stop coddling the hoodlums. Remember Charles Murray from the last episode? From Thomas Sowell to Winston Moore, Murray's 1984 assessment that welfare and soft crime approaches were the true causes of problems in the black community rather than white supremacy and wealth inequality were similarly being made by some in the black community. At the time, prison abolition, drug decriminalization, and other now familiar yet still divisive ideas were on the fringes and most often being promoted by two groups that moderate black Americans rejected and still reject as much as they did white supremacists, black radicals and white liberals. In the black community, drugs were equated with slavery and the KKK. For some, seen as the racial battle of the times. Said Jesse Jackson, "No one has the right to kill our children. I won't take it from the Klan with a rope. I won't take it from a neighbor with dope." Drug dealers, for many black people, were race traitors.
You know what? That makes me think of something, right? As I'm sitting here watching this, and I want to go back to what Jesse Jackson was saying, and I'm going to stop it after what he says, because it's really that rhymes with today's times. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I know Jesse is, you know, a lot of people look at him in a different light now, and that's you know, hey, you know, you do what you do, but he does make some very good points, and I want to listen to this real quick.
Said Jesse Jackson, "No one has to kill our children. I won't take it from the Klan with a rope. I won't take it from a neighbor with dope."
That's because, okay, so I won't take a rope from the Klan, and I won't take dope from a neighbor. That's what's crazy, is because 9 times out of 10, we know who kills them. We know their killer. The killer knows them. You know what I'm saying? And that's what's really wild, right? And it made me think about, you know, during George Floyd. That's when I came out the house. You know what I'm saying? But I can say this, like, I knew these people in my community when I was selling dope. When I was selling crack, I knew the bail bondsmen, the lawyers that had dope, you know, tendencies, and then especially the moms. You know, it wasn't like, you know, now when I went to Minneapolis, when I was living in Rochester, and then went down and sold, it was a little bit different. But when I sold in my area, it was usually to people I knew. It wasn't like we just weren't drug dealer and fiend. Well, some people it was like that, but a lot of these people I already knew. I either did stuff with their kids, or it was their auntie, or their you know, their uncles, and it was like it's a cycle. And it's like, when are we gonna call that out? Because we do know who the neighborhood dealers are. That's the one crazy part, is that I don't understand, is like, and I was talking to this this past weekend to a couple of people in Minneapolis, was if you watch what happened at the council meeting, most of those people up there are known as gangbangers. They're not just known as violence interrupters, they're known as gang members, current gang members. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's really, when people, I find it funny as hell, but that just shows, like, and I'm going to continue showing out today, is like, when you don't understand the problem, you don't understand the solution. Because your solution is only a Band-Aid, because you're only hearing about the parts that you want to hear. Right? And that's why I'm talking about, even with the 80s, a lot of these people, they weren't in our communities. That's one thing that I look at the crime bill that really ruined America, especially when it came to Black Americans, because that's why we got the mass incarceration. That's why we're able to pinpoint the school to prison pipeline. Is because when you look at things like, we go to school, right? I drove a bus to school, had the same, there was no, you know, belt buckle, or you go to prison, they just handcuff you, put you in shackles. There ain't no seatbelt, and it's the same exact bus. Only difference is there's plexiglass. There's things to, and niggas got guns. Back in the day in high school, niggas had guns too. You know, this wasn't the plexiglass. There wasn't the bars. You know that, and that's wild to me. Is like you can compare so much from back then until now, and then the comparisons, and it's like, how do you not see it? How do you not? That's why I want to continue this video, but I want to get into a conversation too as well that happened last night. So I'm going to continue to play this.
For many Black people, were race traders. Modern notions of non-violent drug offenses were a foreign concept to the people of the 1980s who were undaunted with violence on a daily basis. For many, crime and drugs were glued together. It would be an extreme disservice to anyone watching this video on the Black experience in the 1980s to not have a full and objective view at crime and Black responses to it. For many Black Americans living through the frequent violence and despair, the crack epidemic and the resulting crimes could not be shouldered by white supremacy and wealth inequality alone. Likewise, mass incarceration caused irreversible damage to the community, but its existence cannot be fully blamed on white supremacy alone. It's ahistorical to pretend that Black people were passive participants in the creation of mass incarceration and that significant violent crimes, especially against women, just weren't happening or that they were overblown. In 1980, Black people accounted for 44% of arrests for violent crimes and nearly 30% of arrests for property crimes, despite being only 12% of the population. Most of the crimes were intraracial against members of their own community because of proximity and the likelihood of police apathy for Black victims. During the decade, 62% of all drug-related homicides involved Black victims. Thousands died and thousands more were injured or maimed by direct or stray bullets. The Federal Bureau of Justice Statistics calculated, based on crime victimization rates from 1975 to 1984, the lifetime chances of being raped, robbed, or assaulted. They found that if things kept going the way they were, 83% of all Americans aged 12 and up would be victims of some sort of attempted or completed violent crime. There were nightly news reports of gang killings, robberies, and crack cocaine-related arrests. The public also zeroed in on crack babies and their mothers, which we'll come back to in episode 5. Numerous Black authors and artists documented the raw grittiness of the streets of 1980s New York, Chicago, and LA. In LA alone, the number of annual gang-related homicides would rise from 212 in 1984 to 771 in 1991, the same year that the screenplay John Singleton wrote in the late 80s premiered to critical acclaim. Another important fact about gang violence in the 80s was the new prevalence of high-powered military-grade weapons, which came with the international drug connections.
The drug money has turned street gangs into small armies.
We have semi-automatic and full automatic machine guns.
But there is nothing traditional about the firepower now being used. This car was riddled 40 times in a gun battle. The weapons were AK-47s like this one, the favorite assault rifle of many of the world's armies.
More guns on the streets meant that non-drug-related disputes could and did escalate from simple disagreements to shots being fired. Other important violence to note is the rape and sexual assault of the era, which we have way less official numbers on because only roughly 3% of women reported such crimes and way less men. In retrospect, we know the general permissiveness of rape culture in the Black community, like modern revelations about the rapist Bill Cosby, or the retrospective views of threats and stories of rape documented in numerous rap songs of the period. In Monster, the autobiography of a gang member, the bulk of the violence Sanyika Shakur, aka Cody Scott, discussed was Black men attempting to kill each other and hurting civilians in the process in 1980s South Central LA. But women inside and outside of the gangs were raped with impunity, with certain sets, like a group of Hoovers, being known for gang rapes. Of course, rape or violence against women was not just a gang thing. More concrete concretely, we know the homicide rate of black women hovered around 43% during the decade. As crime in black communities grew, so did black attempts at mitigating it, and this includes those asking for harsher punishments after all the violence they saw and experienced. They weren't brainwashed, they were scared. A 1982 essay in The Atlantic titled "Broken Windows, the Police and Neighborhood Safety," written by two white professors, argued that police could reduce major crimes by focusing on little shit, like panhandling, loitering, graffiti, public urination, and other largely victimless public nuisances. The broken windows theory appealed to police chiefs and mayors across the country. Future mayoral hopefuls like prosecutor Rudy Giuliani would make this ideology a core part of their platforms. Plus, cleaning up crime attracted businesses, taxes, and jobs. This was the case in New York, where battling graffiti was the key symbolic problem. For fearful constituents who were terrorized by gun violence in conjunction with the rise of drugs, supporting broken window policies and harsh drug crackdowns would be a no-brainer. In Locking Up Our Own, Crime and Punishment in Black America, James Foreman Jr. detailed how black communities supported eventual mass incarceration. The same year that the Broken Windows article dropped, D.C. was set to vote on Initiative 9, which would legalize mandatory minimum sentencing, 6 years after D.C. had enacted the strictest gun control laws in the country. The initiative was supported by the NRA and opposed by, quote, major civil rights groups, civil liberties organizations, and a citizens coalition called Citizens for Sensible Sentencing. Even still, 73% of the city's voters, many of them in poor black neighborhoods, approved of Initiative 9, which gave 5 to 10 year minimum sentences for firearm crimes. In 1986, D.C. launched Operation Clean Sweep. The anti-drug initiative gave officers the power to, quote, clear corners, establish roadblocks, make undercover purchases, seize cars, and condemn apartments. The program, which largely targeted small-scale dealers and users rather than kingpins, had the support of black voters who were not thinking about the long-term limited voting, employment, education, and housing opportunities of those arrested. The Washington Afro newspaper voiced its support, calling drugs a threat to our race. In the first 18 months of the program, police made 46,000 arrests, or 1 for every 14 D.C. residents. Marion Barry, who as a city council member back in 1975 voted to decriminalize marijuana, said of Operation Clean Sweep, if you are caught with half a gram of cocaine, we will take away your car. If you are caught with 1 marijuana joint, we want your car. Despite the seizing of cars of drug purchasers, D.C.'s homicide rate exploded in 1988, prompting City Council member Nadine Winter to implore Reagan to declare a state of emergency and deploy the National Guard. In 1987, Los Angeles initiated Project Hammer, in which law enforcement led destructive raids and arrested black and brown people because they looked like gang members. And one weekend, 1,453 people were detained. By 1990, over 50,000 people had been arrested in raids, with more black men and women arrested than in any period since the Watts riots of 1965. Many were never charged with anything. In one neighborhood, wrote the LA Times, the police smashed furniture, punched holes in walls, destroyed family photos, ripped down cabinet doors, slashed sofas, shattered mirrors, hammered toilets to porcelain shards, doused clothing with bleach, and emptied refrigerators. Some officers left their own graffiti. LAPD rules, rolling 30s, die. What did this particular raid yield? Less than 6 ounces of marijuana and less than an ounce of cocaine. Some black people upset with the constant gang violence rejoiced at the raids, as long as they weren't one of the many innocent people swept up in the raids or police brutality. Others were conflicted or downright alarmed. Wrote ACLU lawyer Gary Williams, I do not want to see the hammer fall if the tactics employed include the indiscriminate detention and railroaded arrest of black youngsters because they look like gang members or because they happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But dauntless media coverage of crime, which we'll take a look at later in episode 6, fused with real experiences of crime. In 1989, when 22-year-old crack dealer Richard Winrow became the first Californian and the second American sentenced to life in prison without a chance of parole, the man who slammed the gavel was a 79-year-old black judge named David W. Williams. Winrow told reporters, I'm being used as a guinea pig for the war on drugs. Said Assistant U.S. Attorney John Gordon at the time, the poor schmuck just happened to be unlucky that he is the first one, referring referring to the new law Reagan had signed in 1988 that mandated mandatory minimum sentencing for crack and gave people convicted of crack possession 3 times life in prison without the possibility of parole. Congress had also increased sentence minimums in 1984 and 1986, never calling public hearings or getting expert testimony on proposed legislation. The 1988 law created a 100-to-1 sentencing disparity between powder and crack, the latter widely associated with and used by black people. Other war on drugs policies intensified, like a fresh infusion of cash for state and local police who militarized their forces, seized property, and assaulted with impunity. The voices of those who knew this wasn't going to end well were drowned out, like Kurt L. Schmoke. In LA, where crack wars between gangs was rampant, the regional director for the Community Gang Services, Charles Norman, said that only a renewed program of jobs and community-based recreation activities could persuade a majority of gang members to reform. He went on to say, "You can't just suppress people who don't have any hope. I welcome new law enforcement, but there have to be alternatives."
And night after night, there are bodies as the gangs who control the drug trade fight over territory. Across the country, hundreds are killed or wounded every week in gang-related shootings. Many innocent people who just happen to get in the way.
I just want to know why, why my child? What was...
Her 15-year-old daughter was killed.
You tell me where I can go to live in peace and peace of mind, then I will go. But there's nowhere that's safe in the city of Los Angeles.
In 1983, a year before the Bernard Goetz incident, only 2% of New York's felony complaints resulted in jailed offenders. Goetz himself had been robbed by 3 men in 1981. Daryl KB, who had admitted to his group's intentions to rob Goetz that night, had participated in the armed robbery of 3 men just 2 months before the infamous shooting. It's no wonder Goetz had support from some black New Yorkers. The people who agreed with Goetz's decision to draw his gun would be many of the same people desiring a solution to crime through arrests and punishment into the 90s. But cases like the Central Park 5, a 1989 event in which 4 black teenagers and 1 Latino teen were coerced into confessing to a rape they did not commit and subsequently imprisoned, showed that the justice system was fundamentally flawed and often unreliable. And by 1990, there were 130 black police chiefs nationwide in DC, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, and Houston. In 1990 Atlanta, new police chief Eldrin Bell made his stance clear on drug dealers, saying, "Unless we arrest them, incarcerate them, and spit them back out with only their underwear, they beat the system." Of course, discourse about drugs and policing and what prison should even do would continue into the 90s as the black middle class fled from urban areas to suburbs and the Sun Belt in droves. It was around this time that some black leaders were beginning to question harsh mandatory sentencing and the police raids sweeping their communities. Not loudly, but they were beginning to think about it. From harsh sentencing sprung new issues like the increase in drug dealers employing children who didn't get mandatory minimum sentencing. Families were ripped apart when people were sent to prison. Meanwhile, some leaders worried about the war on drugs strictly in financial terms. In New York, summarized Deborah Peterson Small, the increasing population in prison worked to the benefit of upstate politicians and to the detriment of New York City politicians because the resources, the dollars from the state, followed the prisoners up there, and it meant money that was leaving the community, not just people.
That's damn. That's crazy. But also you can see is like, people ask all the time is like, when did the problem start? The problem has always been here. In my eyes, people just they didn't want to see the problem. They wanted to ignore it because it wasn't in their neighborhood. And then when it got to, because I watched the state capitol, right? These committee hearings, and a lot of it, they talk about Minneapolis. They talk about St. Paul. And it's like, why? And I don't understand it, right? So Royce, this is how I found Professor Penn as he goes by. He had AK on there last night. I don't know if it's pre-recorded, whatever it was, but it was a great conversation. And there's a part that I want to play. It's about 7, 8 minutes long, but I honestly feel like this conversation needs to be listened to. It needs to be had. And I'm really glad that, Professor Penn and AK had this last night. It was very, very enlightening. It was very intellectual. It was very articulate, and it was very transparent. And that's what I loved about it. And it made me look, especially when it came to, I watched him, I've seen him a couple times because of, I followed Royce White. And so that's how I found Professor Penn. And it's such enlightening to see that people want to unify people and bring urban politics out to greater Minnesota, and for people to not only to stop judging, but if you're going to talk about it, come down there. You know what I'm saying? Like, be a part of the solution, not the problem, because you only glorify the problem when you're speaking about a problem you can't understand. So I want to get into this conversation between AK Kamara and Professor Penn.
Sincere unity. We don't have that.
Yeah.
We just don't have it. In fact, myself, I got people don't like me, and I'm very likable.
Here's the thing. Not only do I agree that we need unity just because there's just not enough of us, okay? Like, the thing that's so interesting about Minnesota is that if you took every single person that identifies themselves as a conservative Republican in all of the state of Minnesota, you might end up with 31, 32% of the people. Well, you're going to need at least close to 50 to win, unless there's a really strong third party. You take every Democrat, right? They're going to probably tap out at about 33%, maybe 34%. So truly, of political ideologies in the state of Minnesota, there's a giant swath of people that will vote for Obama and then vote for Trump. They exist. They're probably not super interested in being highly involved in the Republican Party because of their nature, but more recently, they have been. And so to me, if we can capture some of them and then we can push that number of solid Republicans and we can be on par with the DFL, then that's how we're going to win. The dirty secret that people don't like to talk about, I've been involved in Minnesota politics since 2006. I remember when Tim Pawlenty won statewide. If you think back during those times, what did we have a very strong presence of in Minnesota politically? We had a strong third party. Okay. I think that's one of the reasons why Tim Pawlenty won, is there was a strong third party that actually took away from the Democrats. And once they effectively got rid of that third party, it's been very difficult for Republicans to overcome that. And so I think that President Trump had one of the closest showings that we've had in a long time, because he's able to appeal to what we would say are outside of the normal framework of Republicans. Now, this all comes back to the unity question. If I believe that the best path forward is to get as many people involved in the Republican Party, and that our Republican parties will then be reflective in the areas where people live, that's why I said, if we have this weird to say this is the only way that you can be a Republican, I think we're going to continue to lose. So instead, we empower people where they live to get involved, to become active. The Republican Party is going to be reflective of that. But lastly, and most importantly, when we get done with this endorsement process, whoever is the candidate has to have support of everyone in Minnesota that's a Republican. I don't want any of this, I kind of support Royce. When Royce won the endorsement, I actually did like a couple of podcasts with him, and I said, listen, if I hear anybody in the party say that they're not going to support you, like, I will call it out. Like, I'm going to do it to them, but you are the endorsed candidate. And so throughout this next system, I'm not going to support any going candidate because I don't believe that I should put my thumb on the scale. I will have a vote because I'm going to run to be a delegate. And if people ask me when I want to have but I just don't want, I hate the idea of like people coming and putting their thumb on the scale. I believe we have this robust contest, but whoever wins that, the endorsement needs to be supported. And that's the unity that's all I want. Whatever. If you're not going to go out there and rah-rah, just at least keep your mouth shut. What I hate are these people that will do these little acts, to get back at people. It's like, just be quiet. If you can't say nothing nice, don't say nothing at all. But that's what we need.
Well, since I wasn't planning on going here.
Yeah.
But, it's not that long ago that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not naming any names, but Dustin Gragey just posted up this past Friday night that nobody worked against Royce. And I try to stay out of the fray because, you're going to just make enemies.
Sure.
But it was such a bald-faced lie, or he's stupid, that I just wrote a very long, I got 100 new followers out of his thread.
Sure.
Because I just told the truth, because I actually was involved, and I do know what happened, and I know why it happened.
Yeah.
I was right there. So those kind of wounds, when we tear the party apart from the inside, the party stalwarts, when the stalwarts of the party, the Gazelkas, the Bensons, the Boschwitzes, the Colemans, when they tear the party a new ass by just coming out and opposing a candidate that won on the first ballot, it doesn't do a lot to encourage that candidate to do what you're asking the next time.
Yeah.
And we just went through that. So it's not that long ago, and that sentiment is still there. It's still there. Now, I'm going to tell you, with the people that are listening to me, I personally don't want to hear another damn thing about somebody's past, because I got one, and you know what? You do too. So since we're into unmasking everybody's past, remember with Grok, anything you've ever done is 6 seconds away from everybody in the state of Minnesota. So let's quit that and just start talking about who supports the policies of President Donald J. Trump. That's your concern as the National Committee man, if I heard you correctly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have all these people that show up and want to run. What's going to be the difference between them if the goal is to have unity?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's say every one of them completely supports every element of President Trump's agenda, which we know is not true, but let's say that it is.
Yeah.
Because we have unity. Who is best suited to go into Minneapolis and St. Paul, to those urban communities, which you just said you're from Devil's Lake, North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
Walter's not from here.
Mm-hmm.
But who is Mr. Basketball in Minnesota? Who's coaching basketball in Minnesota? Who's actually in that community? And that'd be Royce. So if everybody was exactly the same, everybody passed the purity test that you and I both agree we don't do. Let's say everybody was exactly the same. I got 60-year-old people running and a 35-year-old person running. I got people from the outstate. I got someone right from the in-state. So I'm just laying out for those people that don't like me why I think it's so critical in Minnesota that we try to look at candidates that can broaden the base of the party. It's, I like Royce. I like his political philosophy. And people go, well, he swears. I just saw this on X last night. Maybe you should all go downtown Minneapolis and listen to how people talk over there.
Sure.
Okay? It may not work out in, Mora, Minnesota. I get that.
Right.
But if you're in Mora, Minnesota, and you're Republican, please vote Republican with that unity that you're alluding to. We got to get into the city.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to get to that city. And you and I are agreeing about that, right?
And so the other thing is, too, when it comes to having an open race, like we're going to have, there's going to be a lot of competition on the Republican side. There's going to be a ton of people that jump in. There's going to be a bunch of money that's going to be spent. But to me, ultimately, what matters most is who can actually have the support of the people of Minnesota.
Right.
Now, obviously, I believe in the endorsement process. I believe if you decide to go straight to a primary, that's not good. I don't like that. I think as a Republican, especially as the RNC committee man, we need to respect our endorsement structure. And so, to me, that's where it all starts. At the end of that process, though, at the very end, once you get to a primary, then for sure, we all need to be on the same page of taking out whoever the Democrats are running. And so when you ask that question, people are going to ask me like, so who do you support? And my whole thing is, again, I don't want to put my thumb on the scale. And I think there's going to be a lot of really, really good candidates. I think that personally, I liked what Royce was able to bring to the table when he ran this last cycle. I think that there's a bunch of things that I could be critical of, but I'm not here to try and say, here's what I think the past should be or whatever it might be. We can always have conversations. One of the things that I like to always tell people is that if you want to be able to win the hearts and minds of people, you have to go directly to the hearts and minds of people. Like, how do you get in front of them? The other thing in Minnesota is that we don't have a true, and I hope that this is what this turns into, a true counter narrative to our legacy media. And so it's almost impossible for a Republican to actually get a fair shake in the minds of most Minnesotans. And when I say most Minnesotans, when I gave you that diagram of, that vision of a third, the people that are not hardcore Republicans aren't just, listening to average everyday podcasts. They're still consuming their media from more mainstream kind of places. But that is changing. People are starting to listen to podcasts. People are starting to, find independent media sources. So I think that was really the biggest thing that hurt Royce. That wasn't necessarily his policy positions. It's just every legacy media apparatus, even the ones that would sometimes try and be favorable and fair, were just brutal to him. And they created this narrative, which it's wild to see in my estimation, right? Young, black, right? Like all of these things, like the first ever black, like none of that matters to the liberals once it's a Republican, right?
I want to stop it there because that is right. They are correct. Once it becomes just like with Lisa DeMuth, just like with Walter Hudson, to me, it's tokenism. It's, we have them, but you're ignoring, that's the one thing that I see in these recalls. A lot of those recalls, they probably got enough voters to start the recall process, but are you going to get enough signatures to overturn this recall? You know what I'm saying? Are you going to get enough to go through with it? And maybe some of them they will, like Leah Fenke. I think they will. What I'm saying? Breon Curran, they probably will. But there's some. It'll be funny to see Dwayne Quam. He's the only GOP candidate that's elected that has been recalled. The rest have been DFL. But I want to get into something that happened last night out in South St. Paul. And they're talking about where a 3-year-old OD'd. I shouldn't say OD'd, but they got high off of meth. And they thought it was an onion sliver. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. So I want to talk about South St. Paul and how this daycare, where a 3-year-old took meth and thought it was an onion sliver. And there's people that support this, and then there's people that, are asking her to resign. But I just feel like, where are we in politics when it's all about, the man on the totem pole on top, but we're forgetting about the ethics of other people? You know what I'm saying? Like, we should really do what's best for our community, not what's best for you, what's best for our community. Because you're the ones that keep on making, and I'm saying you is because it's y'all. Our public, our elected officials keep on making bad decisions and yet don't want to face responsibility and accountability when they get caught.
Packed house at a city council meeting tonight at South St. Paul over concerns a child tested positive for meth after being sent home sick from daycare. That in-home daycare is licensed to City Council Member Pam Bakken.
And now many residents are questioning her oversight and judgment as others stand in support. Ben Henry's live in South St. Paul with more. Ben?
Kevin and Lindsay, this was not on tonight's agenda, but the community showed up in force. It was split down the middle. Many people in support of Councilmember Bakken, while others were calling for her resignation.
How can we trust you to make good decisions, to exercise good judgment in managing the things facing our city when you can't even manage what takes place inside your own home?
You had a moral and ethical obligation to inform me and other families of the environment our children were in on a daily basis. You failed. Shame on you.
Bakken was at the meeting tonight, but it's policy for council to not comment on the public's remarks, no matter what the topic is. Bakken's daycare is under investigation by the Lakeville Police Department to avoid a conflict of interest. As that investigation continues, an investigation by Dakota County Social Services found evidence to support a finding of neglect, adding a child experienced methamphetamine-related environmental hazards at the daycare. At the meeting tonight, many people stood by Bakken's work and character.
I feel strongly she deserves due process, and it is
crazy.
grossly premature to pass judgment now.
It's sad, and I just want to know this. I'm because I just can't believe how angry you people are. I'm just shocked. I got nothing to say, but all I can say is this family is one of the most outstanding families I've ever seen in my life.
That's my whole thing of it is.
We know the little boy who ingested the meth is going to be okay, but there are still big questions surrounding who is responsible. No one has been charged, no one has been arrested, and we still don't know exactly who was at the daycare that day. Lakeville Police Department telling us today that investigation is still ongoing. I went up to Council Member Bakken after the meeting tonight. She said she did not have a comment. She shared throughout the meeting, including the time when the mayor and council members can bring up anything they'd like. She did not address the comments made tonight or the issue.
That's normal. You know what I'm saying? We all see what's going on with Nicole Mitchell. We all see what's going on. And that's what's crazy is like, when will we ever get transparency? You know what I'm saying? We know that the House, not because they wanted to tell us, you know, they just said a city council member. So there was 2 women that were out on South St. Paul. There was Bakken, and some other lady. But then when you look up the address, you know, through their GIS system, it came back to Bakken. So you could already, you know, tell who it was. And it's like, damn, every time that it's a white woman, here's the crazy thing of it is, right? Because when it was John Thompson, y'all wanted him resigned, right? This is the one thing that I will never understand is that there is no due process for us. There isn't no due process for Black people, you know, and that's the hardest thing is that, you know, yesterday, somebody was exonerated after most of their adult life all of their adult life, basically that they've lived has been behind bars and they never committed a crime. And then and I'm grateful they got to spend the last moments, you know, with his mom. But you don't get that time back. And then we elect these officials. We elect these people. That's why I wanted to play that whole little about the crack era, about the crime. Because we're so quick to blame one another. And then stick up for the people that are doing wrong. And it's crazy because we're supposed to be thoughtful of her. But what about all these people? That's what the crazy thing of it is, right? Because right now I'm in a discussion with Walter Hudson and some other people about juveniles, carjackings. Yes, there should be some kind of punishment. But we set this up, right? This is not something that's been happening, that happened overnight. This is something that's been going on in the making, and we were too dumb. And we didn't care because it didn't affect our kids. We didn't care because it didn't affect what we had going on. But now it's at our front door. It's in our backyard because we don't have no juvenile facilities in Minnesota. Barely any. I think we have 4. You know what I'm saying? What about Totem Town? What Boys Home? A lot of these just sit empty, or we've closed them and turned them into adult prisons. Because by the grace of, you know, I wonder how many juveniles are in Red Wing compared to adults. And I bet you it's more adults than there is juveniles. And that's what I will never understand is like we get rid of things that we could use as alternatives to punishment. We get rid of it. And then we blame. That's the one crazy thing because like I get it. You know what I'm saying? I understand it is because, you know, I remember after George Floyd, there was an incident with a cop, and he was chasing somebody. I think on Linnell Frazier. He was an innocent bystander, but he crashed into Linnell. The cop did. I forget his name. I think it's Brian something. The cop's name is, but he pled guilty. And it's like, damn. And then I think about blessings. They literally knew where the dude lived, but yet y'all still want to drive in residential neighborhoods 60, 70 miles an hour chasing people in busy ass neighborhoods. And then people got to pay the repercussions and consequences because of your choice that you have qualified immunity, even though you made a bad choice, you have that immunity that's going to protect you because we have idiots out here that have committed serious crimes and you guys need to have the authority to chase. I get it. But when you know where they live, when you know who they are, that's the crazy thing, right? So I'm going to see if I can find that video because there is one that actually, you know what? I'll go back to that. I know what that is, actually. I'll bookmark it. But that's what I want. I want to show that to Jamal Osman. And that's what I'll play next. Why? Wow, I can't yet. I'll go back to that, Wilson. Damn, yeah, he's so right on that one. Why haven't Jamal Osman been charged? Right, I agree. So that wasn't the... Damn, where's the video? Did I post it like that? Oh no, here it is. So this is the video that I wanted to...
Blowing out in front of traffic, never cared, I ain't lying. Nigga, know pulling up, hopping out, what a cost on the drive. Hop out, bliss, fuck 'em up on both sides. Take my way for press, on the spot the whole time. Blowing out in front of traffic, never cared, I ain't lying. Nigga, never play with me, you can't name one time. Last nigga got chased, all the way in his home. Fuck Leo, roll him up, put his ass in every song. I ain't doing no right, this shit off the dome. Nigga play, he
I get with that song though. But that's, you know,
pulling up, hopping out, what a cost on the drive. Hop out, bliss, fuck 'em up.
That's what's crazy is you see, you know, things like this. Oh, let me take this off the screen because y'all can't see shit. So you see somebody go out to come out of the windshield, right? And it's crazy. It's like, this my whole thing of it is. Like, what are we, I don't understand. Boom, bam, wham. It's like, God damn, I will never understand that. It's like, when are we as people gonna stand up and be like, yo, this is gonna be our situation? It's not far away. You know what I'm saying? It's not, to be honest, it's not that far away. You know, it used to be happening all the time. That's the one crazy thing, right? Is during this conversation, and I said, what do we do about this problem? Because we can't get rid of it. We've only made it, in my eyes, worse. We haven't made it better. We've made it, in my eyes, worse, right? So I don't understand it because you get rid of the facilities that protected, I shouldn't say protected, but made people have to face their consequences, right? Because we were, and that, in my eyes, a lot of punishments did not meet the crime, right? And then when they do meet the crime, we see people like to ignore it, right? And I don't understand why. Because you see this, real stories of Minneapolis council member who founded a shell nonprofit with no apparent purpose besides fraud, absolved himself of responsibility by handing control of the organization to who? The mayor's aide. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Fry, whatever the fuck y'all want to call him. And then you have this, right? So my question is, you know, just like with Ryan Winkler, is why have Osmond and his wife not been charged in feeding our future? Mary Mortery has authority to charge, and Keith Ellison can only step in at her request. The AG already used his power to shut them down, and the U.S. attorney could work with either or both offices, right? So, you know, that's what it is. Wilmer, Mankato, St. Cloud, Wake Park, St. Paul, more than $10 million was used negligently. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, that's a good question. That's possible, but since he is an elected official, the public deserves to know if he has accepted immunity or made a deal. You damn right he does. Right. Nope. And I never thought about that, if he snitched or not. I'm no lawyer, but it is possible that he served as a source for the investigation. And maybe that's why they haven't done anything to him, because the mayor's aide they got. You know, he's in Salim and Abdul and I think that buddy's name, but it was over $10 million. And it's like I don't understand it. You know, I will never understand it. It's like, how do people expect for us to do good, and then all we see is people doing bad and we congratulate them? We do all types of things to make it seem like they're doing right when they're doing wrong. And we could have shut it down, but because we think that they're doing right, because we're told or we're paid, because it fits our benefit, that's not right. So I want to get into feeding our future. And this happened at trial yesterday, that Joe Thompson went to the judge, Nancy Brazil, and said that one of the witnesses was trying to tamper with the jury and bribe them. So I want to get into this and I want to show it. So
Opening today, the Feeding Our Future trial is set to continue.
The trial is resuming following new allegations of witness intimidation. Bill Keller is live in our newsroom with the latest developments on that. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, guys. In fact, as day 6 of this trial gets underway, the judge making some changes, some adjustments following concerning developments both inside and outside that courtroom. This morning, prosecutors will continue to lay out their case against Amy Bach, the woman accused of orchestrating the Feeding Our Future scandal, along with a meal site operator named Salim Saeed. Those two are on trial for their alleged role in that $250 million fraud scheme. Well, yesterday, federal prosecutors informed the judge in this case that they had learned about a possible instance of witness intimidation. They say that a man who pled guilty to charges in this scheme last month and was set to testify as a witness at trial was approached by another defendant who has to face trial themselves. In response, the judge said that Saeed's phone, he seized it and asked that prosecutors get some more information about the contents and the details of that incident. The judge also ordering that the Feeding Our Future defendants sit away from the jury following another disturbance in court. Now, this is not the first time that defendants in this case have tried to influence the outcome. During the first trial last summer, 5 people were charged with attempting to bribe a juror just as they were set to begin deliberations. That juror dismissed after to report that someone delivered a gift bag with $120,000 inside, along with a note saying that the money was for a vote of not guilty. So far, 2 of the 5 involved have pleaded guilty to those bribery charges. Now, in all, 70 people have been charged in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme. Nearly half have pled guilty, with some expected to testify against Bach at trial. Witness testimony set to resume 9 o'clock this morning.
I haven't seen no tweets come out yet, but I haven't really looked at anything from Deanna Winter. I want to get into this, right, about Nicole Mitchell. So yesterday, the GOP Republicans filed an ethics complaint against Nicole. And I want to get into that, right? Because does it get anywhere? You know, and also it was a conflict of interest. There was other things involved with it. So it makes me wonder of, like, what can we do to eradicate bad behavior?
Republicans held a news conference to announce updated and new ethics complaints against Democratic Senator Nicole Mitchell. Here's what they had to say at the state capitol.
We're here today for one reason, and that's just to announce updates and additions to the ethics complaints against Senator Mitchell. Since April of 24, her arrest, since the 2024 arrest, Senate Republicans have been very clear. Her actions have damaged the integrity of the Senate and distracted us from the important work that we need to be doing here. Unfortunately, Senate Democrats have shielded Senator Mitchell and serious consequences to advance their agenda. And they're also avoiding their bipartisanship and even allow the Senate to become complicit in the legal strategy that delays both justice for the victim and holds the senator accountable for her actions. Today we are adding a new ethics charge against Senator Mitchell in casting the deciding vote on a motion concerning her own membership in the Senate. Many have rightly asked, how can a member cast a vote that determines their long-term ability to be in the Senate? We believe this is a clear violation of the conflict of interest rules that the Senate holds to. Additionally, with the announcement of a second felony charge against Senator Nicole Mitchell, we have updated our existing ethics complaint, and we are going to be running that. It's filing that today too.
On January 27th, the Minnesota Senate had the opportunity to lift the cloud over the body that had existed ever since police officers found Senator Mitchell hidden in a basement bathroom of her stepmother's home. Minnesota statute and Senate rules both outline the process for handling conflicts of interest and expect members to disclose any issue for which they have a financial conflict. Members are expected to abstain from votes for which they have a financial interest. Senator Mitchell did not disclose her conflict and did not abstain from a procedural vote that stood in the way of a vote on her expulsion. Senator Mitchell had 10 months to contemplate her conflict on this vote. 10 months. She was reminded of it on the floor prior to voting. She voted anyway. Senator Mitchell deliberately and defiantly violated the rules of ethical conduct of the Minnesota Senate. Her vote was a deciding vote that prevented the expulsion vote from occurring. Our contention is simple. Senator Mitchell has a conflict of interest in any vote related to her political future. Any vote to expel her from the Senate would result in the loss of her employment as a senator and would immediately end access to the salary and benefits afforded to a legislator. The benefits to remaining a senator are considerable. Senator Mitchell is an employee of the state with a salary, health insurance, and assigned staff to help her with her work. And even more so, she has been able to use her position as a senator to delay her trial for months. She had everything to gain from casting her decisive vote on January 27th and everything to lose. If she were expelled, she'd lose a job, health benefits, staff, and her trial would be able to proceed because she would lose the privileges and statute that exclusively are granted to legislators.
Today we are filing an updated complaint against Senator Mitchell with the Senate Subcommittee on Ethical Conduct. This update enhances the original complaint filed against Senator Mitchell April of last year. The updated complaint contains information including the filing of an additional felony charge against Senator Mitchell. In addition to being charged with first-degree burglary, Senator Mitchell has also been charged with possession of burglary or theft tools. As it stands today, the facts are stunning. We have a sitting member of the Minnesota Senate facing not one, but 2 charges associated with breaking into her stepmother's home. The additional information in the new charging documents offer more detail on the events of April 22nd, 2024. Senator Mitchell was found in the middle of the night, hidden in a basement bathroom, dressed all in black, with her shoes removed and shoes hidden near or under a couch. A crowbar was found near a window where Senator Mitchell apparently broke into the home of her stepmother. Senator Mitchell admitted to law enforcement officers, quote, "There were just a couple of things," unquote, "of her dad's she, quote, wanted to come get," unquote. Senator Mitchell stated, quote, "I know I did something bad," unquote. We know the actions of Senator Mitchell betray the public trust and bring the Minnesota Senate into dishonor and disrepute. The time is now for the Subcommittee on Ethical Conduct.
Man. So, honestly, I do feel like there's so much that is going on as at stake inside of our state is that we feel like there should be something done. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, right? What we're seeing is that there's a 2-tiered justice system. What we're seeing is that it's two-tiered to talk to people, and not talk to people about how they're treated. You know, if you come from a poor community and you don't have money, you're marginalized. You don't have the same opportunities and chances that, let's say, somebody on or elected official, or you know, your family's in law enforcement, your daddies or your mommy's an elected official. We're starting to understand that and see that when it comes in a certain color, or even when it's a certain politics. You know, if you're a Democrat, we're seeing that you can get kids high on meth, and you don't have to face no type of responsibility. You know, I feel like you owe, and it shouldn't be just me. It should be like we all, because what if that was your child? Wouldn't you want answers? If you knew that it was an elected official and you were sending your child to go to daycare and they came back high, and you noticed, you took them to the hospital, they were doing shit that you ain't never seen them do before. You know, they was twitching, you know, acting anxious, running around like, what's that, Speedy Gonzalez, when they're not usually like that, you know, and then you go to the hospital and they're telling you that your child is high. And you're like, why? How? And then they say, well, I was eating the onion slivers in the bathroom, but it was meth. Who brought meth into your house? I think we are all, you know, that's the one crazy part of it is. And to me, to be honest, I'm not owed that. The mother who trusted your daycare that is in your name, that is in your house, entrusted with her child. And yet we can't get no kind of transparency, not even the mother. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of these people in Minnesota is like, why is it okay for certain people, but it's not okay for everybody? That's the conversation we need to have. That's something that we got to talk about. That is something that we honestly need to talk about. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if you don't have these tough and hard conversations, I'm honestly going to get to a solution? Because I feel like, you know, that's the one crazy part is, you know, even during the 1980s and the early 90s, you know, you had crack and then you had cocaine. We had laws that made crack a worse drug than cocaine, even though it's the same thing, it's just cooked. But yet we allow this fentanyl to be killing people, and yet we don't say nothing. Because to be honest, it doesn't really affect a lot of people. It doesn't, but see, it does. Because all it takes is one pill. One pill. One, and then it's done. They're done. And that's why, you know, that's the crazy thing that I think about every day is that it just takes we shouldn't be rapping about codeine. We shouldn't be rapping about perks, especially the 30s, because you can make them in a storage facility in a machine that you bought off of Amazon. And the ingredients came from England or China. You know what I'm saying? Through Mexico or through Canada. And yet they kill our population. That's the one crazy part, because when you look into Kensington, Pennsylvania, which is in Philadelphia, right? It's a part of Philadelphia. I should have said Pennsylvania, not Philadelphia. You know, you look into Minneapolis, you look into, I just showed my wife a video this morning of Detroit, because they had a water break and it's really cold out there. And it's the water out there. I mean, you see it is high. It's like if you have a sedan, it's damn near to your it's to your windows. And they don't happen in Chanhassen. You see those in impoverished neighborhoods that they don't care about. That's the same thing, okay? You think about Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi. That's the one crazy part is you hear about all these bodies found behind a police department, but it's not in the news. That's not something we talk about because it doesn't affect It affects people they don't give a fuck about. And again, I agree with AK about the legacy media. You see more and more people going to independent media. You don't see people going to CNN, Fox, Care 11, NBC, none of that shit. You see people making a more educated and wiser decisions when it comes to, okay, what are we going to believe? You know, I will tell you this. I don't believe I've ever seen, since I've been a baby, I ain't never seen that many plane crashes ever. And maybe, you know, maybe it is because it's more on social media, more it's that it's videos going around. But hey, we see it now. And what are we going to do about it? The same thing when it comes to these carjackings. You know, the people that shot the guy in the face last week who was peeking out the window, they were arrested. So it was a 34-year-old, a 19-year-old, and two 17-year-olds. Okay, but you got them. What about the next people? You know, we like to spotlight certain people, but Minneapolis, and that's one's crazy because I was looking at stats last night. When I was listening to Professor Penn and AK, and you look inside these communities, you look inside these redlining, and especially you can tell it because in certain areas, look at their homicides and then look at how many are unsolved. And then look at the victims. And then you tell me who it is. Right? Because it's all going to be, you're going to see, not that they're all black, but they have something very, very, very much in common. That they come from marginalized and poor communities. And what I'm talking about is not just talking about it's not a black and white issue. What the issue is a gap. Right? Because I will tell you like this, you know, I think about Vanessa. I think about so many other individuals. You know, you had the kids, you had Anaya. I honestly, I don't think that the Minneapolis police care because they happen to black kids. You know, I think about Terrell May's mama all the time. You know, that and where his garden is at. I think about Jamar Clark. All these memorials that we have. And how many people have actually gotten justice? Because I know that Terrell May's mom had to bury him, but she don't know who killed her baby. She doesn't know who pulled the trigger. The same thing with, that's the one, the streets talk, but Crime Stoppers and the Minneapolis Police Department don't. Let's be honest, because here's the one thing is that you had killers locked up, but the wrong ones. They were innocent. You had Marvin Haynes, you had Mayan Burrell, you had Edgar, and how many others? Cornell Jackson. How many others? You know, that's the one crazy part is I'm hearing is you caught a woman in her mom, whatever stepmother's basement. You know, I get it, her dad passed away. But if that was a black man, y'all would railroad him. And I'm not talking about railroad him. You would, just like we heard about Royce. They tore him apart. But yet, because it all depends on your color. It all depends on your wealth class. It all depends on your status. Because you're in a whole nother. I'm gonna tell you like this. Meek Mill said there's levels to this shit. And we gotta understand there is. Because it's not just racism. Because it be my own skin folk that look at me and be like, you know what, he part of the problem. When actually I'm trying to be part of the solution just because I cuss or I smoke weed. They think that I'm part of the problem. But yet you call a reverend who has done things for, I shouldn't even say things to women, you know, who has allegations, and because the Minneapolis Police Department or Hennepin County doesn't want to do their jobs. And then you have lawyers like Bobby Joe Champion, you know, Cedric Frazier. This is my one thing. Why do we have so many y'all motherfuckers attorneys? But this is one of the most states, the worst, with gaps. when it comes to education. Everybody want to be a civil rights attorney. We boost them up. Well, how many cases have you won? How many cases have you spotlighted? How many cases have you took, not just changed your bank accounts because Ben Crump wanted to pump you up? I don't get that. There's so many stories out here. So many. You know, that's the one crazy thing. I was on Instagram yesterday, and you know, I'm sorry for him. You know, he said he has the paperwork that he was paying everything. But yet now, because you have a corporation or a landlord that wants to screw people over, and then we have to prove it. We have to prove that they're in the wrong. And then have to make other people pay for it. Their wrongs, even though the corporation is in the wrongs, and maybe that at some point that'll get, you know, all straightened out in court. But until then, why do we have to suffer until the truth comes out? I don't get that. I don't understand that. So I just think about all the people that have lost their lives. I think about all the people that died for what? Because we haven't changed nothing, right? So I want to get some little final thoughts about today. And it's like, we talked about daycare investigations to shady nonprofits, witness tampering and ethics complaints. Minnesota politics is looking more like a soap opera than a state government. Are these isolated incidents, or are we staring at a system that's rotting from the inside out? Here on the Urban Conservative, we just don't ask tough questions. We want your take. Is this corruption as deep as it seems, or is this business as usual? Hit us up in the comments or on social media, because it's time to call it like it is. It is. It's time. It is. You know, it's time to look at your neighbor, because what do you care more about? Do you care more about the fame and the clout and changing your bank accounts to changing the community that you say you live in, but actually you cosplay. You cosplay. Most of these people live in Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, Robbinsdale, Maple Grove, Coon Rapids, Apple Valley. They don't live in North Minneapolis. You know, that's the one crazy part, because, you know, I hear people talk about the GOP and Republicans all the time in North Minneapolis. And especially when it came to Professor Penn, he's been over there. He said he was over there door knocking for Royce. I remember in 2022 when we went around with Jensen, who's running for governor. We had Ryan Wilson, Cicely Davis, and some others, right? And it was really hard to get like town halls, or for them to be able to meet the people. You know, so it's like when you have that R in front of your name or behind it, whatever it is, that Republican, you know, people look at you a certain way, not about the policies. They look at the narrative on the party. And we need to really get away from that, because I see a lot of people protecting Democrats and DFLers, and even the same thing with Republicans, but we never get to what's right and what's wrong. You know, everybody wants to divide, everybody wants that division. But if we can become clearer on what is right and what is wrong, because this isn't about, you know, it shouldn't be about racism. It should be about bad policies, because that's where it leads back to, you know, and that's why I say it's not about, some people are hateful. I'm not going to lie. Some people really don't like Black people, and you've heard it out their own mouths, not mine. You know what I'm saying? But we've seen that history. And when are we actually going to do something about it and not just talk about it, not do a pointless boycott? Because we did that years ago. We did a bus boycott. We marched over a bridge. We marched to DC. And what has changed? Because we're still doing that same behaviors. The only thing we haven't done is a revolution. We haven't made our voices heard. We haven't gone to and taken over the state capitol and be like, you know what? It's time. We got to make a difference. We have to be that change that we want to see, because we can't just keep on being on the couch saying that we're doing something. Because what are we doing? You know, I hope today I get some emails back, because I wrote a couple legislators, and I want to talk. I want to talk about this fraud. I want to get to solutions, because there's a lot of it that I feel like people are ignoring because it hits a certain area. It hurts North Minneapolis. It hits Rochester, but then again, it only hits a certain population. So then you don't care because it's not at your door. So then again, I have to go to politicians like, well, and I'm not saying nothing against them, right? I'm trying to, after listening to that last night, I really get that unifying message, right? So I'm willing to put my petty ass bullshit even aside for a greater cause. And that's my community, because I love my community. I love the people in my community. And I want to see, kids that are scared to come out of their houses to play because bullets fly. And that's real. That's the truth. You know what I'm saying? Bullets do fly. There's kids that can't go outside in their backyards because you have people shooting. And they don't care about innocent lives. They don't. They don't care. So, but we have to be tougher on crime. But how? Because during the 80s and 90s, y'all got soft. Now y'all are soft. And then now we're dealing with it because we had to pay the repercussions of bad policies. And then when we point them out that you're repeating history, and by repeating history, you can't erase the bad parts of it. You can't take out that, so many black men, so many black women have been raped, have been mass incarcerated, have been wrongfully incarcerated, have been wrongfully killed through the death penalty, have land stolen. And I'm not talking about their little banner about land stolen. I'm talking about our families that were wronged by legislation, by policies that we thought were okay. Because it affected it. We thought it was going to better our community when it hurt our community. Here's the one thing that I will understand, even when it comes to slavery, right? It's a dark part of American history. It's a very dark part that nobody really wants to talk about. But it's something that we need to talk about, right? Because it all leads back. It all leads back. We can't confront juvenile crimes today with something that we caused years ago. That's why we only have 4 facilities in Minnesota for kids, for juveniles. And none of them are in Minneapolis. They're all in surrounding areas. Besides, the homeschool is closed. Miss Robbins has talked about that, Paul Novotny. Rev has talked about it. If we actually did solutions and answers for kids that, you say that we've lost hope for, there's no hope for them, there's no getting better, there's no, yes, we can. There's so much we can do. But because people feel like there's nothing that we can do, y'all don't want to do nothing. And that's not, in my eyes, that's not cool. I don't think that will ever be cool. You know what I'm saying? It was like, I don't get it. You know what I'm saying? I totally don't get it. And it's like, yeah. One thing that I will never understand is, when will we as people do the right thing, right? When will we do what's right? For us? When will we do what's right for the economy? For, we talk about Black Wall Street. Well, let's have a Black Wall Street. Let's have a Black Wall Street for everybody. Not just, taking it back to an era, but let's really bring it where everybody prospers, not just one community, but every community. So with that being said, man, I want to get up out of here, and I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Cold as hell, but it'll be a little bit warmer tomorrow. And I want to leave y'all with this. You know what I'm saying? As I always say, is, you know, this is Black People by some Minneapolis legends. You got Prince Riley, Mac Turner, and Mac Irv. So chill with that. And with that being said, win or fail, freedom or jail, heaven or hell, wish me well. And y'all have a great one and keep on doing you. And I will see y'all tomorrow. Bless, be peace.
Who died in police custody.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Black people, we ain't just black people. Yeah, I bet they want us gone for good. They used to sell us for the goods. Yeah, cause we just black people. Yeah, it's people sinning every day. It ain't just black people. Yeah, we ain't just black people. Yeah, I bet they want us gone for good. They used to sell us for the goods. Yeah, cause we just black people. Yeah, it's people killing every day. It ain't just Northside baby engraved with a needle. Put us in grace, get away is illegal. I cannot bow to the face of an eagle. Home of the brave is a brave for my people. Drowning in 10,000 lakes full of evil. Black on black crime, no excuse to be lethal. They take a brother, they take brother me too. I lost a brother from crime in the streets too. I do not care to compare, it ain't equal. Black man arrested and he lost his life. Won't be the same if the skin color changed. White man that shot up the church still alive. Philando got shot in his girlfriend face. She never got to be called his wife. Police that shot him beat that case. He got to make it back home to his wife. Yeah. What's worse than dying from something that was supposed to protect your life? How would my mama feel knowing I was the next to die? They used to put shackles on our feet, feel like I'm next in line. Yeah, I go crazy for my black people. Black people, we ain't just black people. Yeah, I bet they want us gone for good. They used to sell us for the goods. Yeah, cause we just black people.
We deep down inside, bro. Like something needs to be done.
We ain't just black people. Yeah, I bet they want us gone for good. They used to sell us for the goods. Yeah, cause we just black people. Yeah, it's people killing every day. It ain't just black people. They rather see us when we black and blue. Hands on their weapons when they spot us as we passing through. No matter who. And black woman got too much attitude. So they say, girl, speak your truth, I can't be mad at you. I see reflections of myself at 9 and 10 when I see a group of kids same color as my skin. Back when the only thing I worry about was recess with my friends. When nobody ever told me all that fun was bound to end. You can't be black and be a kid, playing cops and robbers. You can't be toying with your life like that, them cops and robbers. You can't be black while wearing hoodies, or you Trayvon Martin. You can't be black while in your car, you might be Floyd. I mean God, cause we just black people.
This as more protests erupt overnight in American cities, the anger growing across the country, from New York to Denver to Los Angeles, following the death of George Floyd in police custody.
Every day, it ain't just black people. We ain't just black people. Yeah, I bet they want us gone for good. They used to sell us for the goods. Yeah, cause we just black people. Yeah, it's people killing every day. It ain't just black people.